Director of Profitability Partners. We're very focused on helping hospitality venues earn more profit. So just a little bit about myself. I started working in hospitality around 10 years ago. I own a venue. I work with a lot of venues around Australia, quite a few in Victoria. We focus mostly on planning to actually make a profit. So it's not about, so for us, it's not about hoping to make a profit, it's planning to make a profit. And by doing that, we go through and to do that, we go through 4 steps with every venue we work with, and we put processes around it to make sure we achieve a profit. I also own a venue. So the venue I own, I adopt these same principles. I act as the venue owner. I stay out a lot of the day-to-day stuff to make sure that the venue managers can make decisions and be free to be able to, keep improving the venue and making the venue more profitable. So first question, just got some questions. So how's everyone doing? Good? Good? And how are you feeling? Got some friends here as well from some of the clients I have. So, sorry? Yeah. And who's enjoying the show? Yeah? Yep. Lots of free food to have. So you only just got here, Liam, I know. So the wine section, I'll show you where it is. So just a little bit more. So that's the big part I'll be going through today as well as the 4 steps, is the decision-making that goes behind. And I suppose what I'm an accountant and what the real role of an accountant is, a lot of misunderstanding about accounting and what we do, but I'll try and clarify what I think an accountant should do. So it's just some of the big problems we're facing in hospitality today. I've noticed recently it's been a lot of declining sales with who have declining sales. Customer spend and customer average spend is well down, probably from where it was a year ago. Wages are still going up. Just had an award increase of 3.75%. There's a lot of salary pressures. So a lot of managers who are looking for more salary because their cost of living's gone up as well. So it's just a natural flow and effect. Problem is, because we're in such a discretionary spend industry, we're the first one where they stop spending, where customers stop spending, and probably the last where they come back. So when there's inflation, like what we've got at the moment and costs going up, it hurts hospitality more than it does anywhere else. However, I sort of have a promise that if you follow these 4 steps and you plan for these changes and plan for these challenges, you can get through. You can manage them. They become a lot less daunting. And, there is light on, and you can always look to the light on the other side that things won't stay this life forever. In the 10 years that I've been in the industry, I haven't seen the consumer sentiment down as much as it is at the moment, but there's still plenty of people going out. There's still plenty of money being spent. Still not quite what it was, but still the money, there is still a customer base that will go out, still wants to go out and enjoy, have a good time. So who's interested in this? Can I get a show of hands? Yep. Good. Thank you. So everything I'm about to go through today is in the venue growth package that we provide. However, because of that, we have a lot to cover. So I'll be moving quite quickly. So, and moving quite quickly so I can get through all the content. So just today, I'll be seeking a little bit of interaction. It's just a few show of hands, nothing too daunting, hopefully. I might ask a question or two. I know we all love learning through case studies. So I have a case study I've prepared, which will show how this applies in the real world. And we've been asked a lot of questions about our profitability planning session. So I'll hopefully have some time at the end to go through that. Within the 45 minutes we have together, I'll be going through the 4 steps and learning about the 4 steps. I do a lot of one-on-one sessions where we talk about the same principles and we can see how it applies in your world. So this is some of the problems I see. So this is basically the 4 steps. I've come up with an acronym, just PERI, because being a PERI Chile, we can sort of relate that to the hospitality world, the food market. But it's a lot to do with planning, execution, results, and improvement. So they're the basic 4 steps. I'll go through each one and explain what I mean by that. But they also have the fundamental behind it. So I look at them as the simple word planning, execution, results, and improvement. But then there's budgeting, forecasting, and so on behind each step, and having a process behind each one of those to make sure that we have a very profitable venue. So the first one to talk about is step 1, planning. where we start. So obviously we plan to have a profitable venue. We don't hope to have a profitable venue. I mentioned that as one of the favorite quotes I have. It's, we can all hope to, and we can all keep trading as we are, or we can have a plan and we can have some numbers around it to say where we want things to be, and where we want things to be, and making sure that those numbers are in line with a profitable venue. This is the basic sort of premise behind what I plan, and what I sort of say is that sales are a pie. You've only got so much of a pie, and then you have to fit these key numbers inside that pie, with a big section of it being needing to be profit. But they're a reality. We have to have costs, we have to have wages, we have our overheads, and our rent is included in that. So it's a very important thing to consider that, we have 100%, and then each one of these falls into a certain percentage, and what's left is some profit, hopefully. So some of the important plan side steps that I sort of consider. The first most key one to me, you're trying to predict the future. So the future's complicated, the future's unknown. So you can't be too complicated with your thinking. You've got to keep it quite simple. You've got to drag out your key numbers and make sure that they're simple enough where you can plan for them, you can have processes behind them, and you can improve them. The second one being, you have to know what your key numbers are. And the pie chart, basically in hospitality, if we break it down, if we simplify it, there's only a few. So we can break it, and if there's only a few, it becomes a lot easier to achieve. We're not thinking about every single number in our reports, in our numbers. We're thinking about just a few, and we're having processes on a few, because those are the few that have the biggest impact on our business. One of my big ones too is we have to make sure the budget's realistic. I have an example. I was talking to someone earlier about, for example, you might put in like a typical wage cost in most of the business sites here, anywhere from say 30, maybe 40% at the worst. But if you're setting a budget of 15%, it's probably in certain venues, it's probably unachievable, and it's probably unrealistic. So it's probably something you shouldn't do. So you've got to look at what you've been achieving. If you're achieving a 35, you might look for 33. You might look for 32. Some gradual improvements, not thinking that you're going to fix everything straight away. Although I have seen in certain cases you can do that, but they're on the extreme examples where someone might be running their wages at 60%, which is it's easy to improve from that point. And you've got to make sure your budget meets your needs. So if you've got loans that you need to pay, which don't always fit into a budget, they're just a cash flow item, you still have to plan for them. You still have to make sure that you can meet those commitments. So your budget needs to be at a level which meets, for example, if you're forecasting a $50,000 profit and you've got $100,000 in loans, you're not going to be able to make your loans. So you need to make some adjustments to make sure, or to plan to meet those commitments. Here's a quick example of a budget. Now, the key with this, there's a lot of numbers there, and not as many as you'd normally see in a budget, because they're all grouped, because I've tried to present them simply. And the red numbers are the ones you can change. They're your key numbers. You change those, you make your improvements, and you can start planning to hit these certain percentages. You can look at where your months are. You're going to hit strong. You have strong numbers. You're going to look at months where you have some weaker numbers, and you can plan around that. So just a simple layout. It might look daunting, but once it's explained and you go through it, it's not as complicated as it seems. Okay, the next phase is execution. Now, execution is where I talk about forecasting a lot. So you have your plan. Now you have to go and use your plan to actually and execute it so that you can make sure that plan's achieved. The one thing is with forecasting is it actually is a little bit simpler in the budget. It's only really in forecasting, I only look at two numbers, being sales and wages. I try and look at it every day. So in the venue I own, I have my manager making sure she's checking her numbers every day, thinking about how the week's looking. And then after she went and think about and if things don't quite go to plan, make some changes. So the market can change. You can think, for example, you're going to have a big day on a Friday, for example, and then it starts raining. So then you need to adapt to those changes. You can have cancellations of bookings. You can have functions that might not go ahead. There's all sorts of things you need to look for and think about when you're planning a week or when you're executing a week. And of course, and the most bypass part for me, you have to actually analyze it. You have to think about it and actually work on improving it every single week. It's a really important mindset to have, that you're looking to improve and you're looking to analyze what you're doing. So the next slide is just a simple forecasting template. So the forecasting template, while there's a lot of numbers on there, it's color focused because the colors mean something. Green means good, red means bad. Trying to keep everything sort of on a binary level, but good or bad. because it's easier to make decisions when it's only two options. When you've got numbers of options and when you're trying to hit all sorts of things, it overcomplicates it and makes it very hard to achieve. So, and even the orange and the blue, they mean something. It's just entry points. Everything else is sort of locked out, so you can't change it. So the integrity of the spreadsheet stays the same. Okay, and you can see with this sort of sales, they sort of expected great bev sales, ended up getting great food sales instead. So there was some adapting that needed to happen to make sure that they still kept everything in line. But food sales and bev sales are just as good as each other, so we didn't have to change wages too much. Step 3, we talk about results. Now, in our results, this is where we might look at, I often think results are much more important to look at weekly than, say, on a monthly basis. I find results you should be knowing or should be understanding whether you're making a profit or how you're going almost every day. It's not about coming to the end of a month and being surprised with a result. You need to know, you should have a good idea before you come to a monthly result, what that's going to look like. So, but however, I always make sure when I do the weekly results, everything's compared against a budget. I also try and compare against previous weeks. I have a concept which I'll show in a minute of a weekly profitability report, which gives you an indication of how your profit's going. It's not exact because we don't have all the numbers yet. We're looking at a month. And of course, then there's a monthly profit loss report, which is $5 and actually confirms whether or not you're making money. So this is what our profitability report looks like. Same sort of concept, green, red, a lot of comparisons, but also very percentage focused, not focused too much on just dollars and all that sort of thing. And then I might have another report on there which gives you a profit itself for certain, if that's something that you're looking to have. And you can see this particular venue has very volatile numbers, but doesn't change their goals. They're still trying to achieve a budget. They've got a bit of red. They've got a bit of a challenge to come back from the year to date, but they're starting to get better, on a week-to-week basis. And the last one is improvement. Now, this is where I talk a lot about mindset and about having a profitable mindset, which could also be a positive mindset. You've got to be thinking about, how do I improve? How do I get better? I have a sort of a belief that if you don't try and get better, you can't really stay the same. So you'll end up getting worse. So if you at least you have that mindset, you'll get it better. You're more likely to achieve it than if you have a mindset that everything's hard, everything's too hard, too difficult. It's less likely to be achieved. So this is also the part where I bring in a lot of coaching. So Bill Gates, this is one of Bill Gates's quotes, that everyone needs a coach. And I believe you need a coach in a lot of different areas. So we can talk about coaching from a sport perspective, but there's also a coach who can help you with numbers. And that's what I try and do. And I do it in a way which is very focused on keeping things simple, like I've mentioned, and it's very focused on making sure we always try and improve. So just the roles of a coach, they're there to help you. And one thing we've talked about is goal setting, and that's what a budget really is. It helps the coach define and reach their goals. It also is someone you can discuss with, if a coach is the right person, such as a person who is an accountant or someone who understands the industry really well. They can help you out and understand whether they're making a profit. One of the important things is add some accountability, because it's one thing to, keep doing this and go along by yourself. But if there's someone there putting pressure on you and making you accountable to these numbers, then you're more likely to improve. Motivation is a very important one. And of course, constant feedback. So it's one thing to sort of think you're doing well. It's another thing for another person to acknowledge that you're doing well or to offer you advice and help you improve. And at least one of the most important coaches, than what I've been talking about a little bit, is decision making. So one thing with decision making at accountants is that it's not actually associated that accountants are there to actually help you make decisions. When I was in my first year of university, there was a lecturer who talked about what is the role of an accountant. And it was actually very simple in his mind, and it's been sort of walked into this thinking of doing tax and doing these other things. But really the core of an accountant's function is to help venue owners or help users of their reports improve their decisions. So, and that's stuck with me right through, and it's something that I've tried to build a business around and trying to work around, because we make so many decisions. We have venue owners making decisions. We have venue managers making decisions all the time. We have chefs making decisions about different things in our venue. They all need to be supported, and they all need to be included in this whole process of improving their number and constant improvement. So I've just got this is where I'll just move into a case study. So this is where this is a venue with 4 venues. When I first looked at this venue, they had their managers weren't really into the numbers. There was a big belief in the organisation that wages were too high. They had really strong sales. They had quite high puts of gods have sold, but they had quite poor profitability. So, and one of the big things I came into the organisation, and the finance managers often involved in the organisations I work with, is that they were very sceptical, very reluctant, and they didn't believe that the managers could change the way they were. However, once we started working with them, this is the result we saw. So there was 2022 to 2023. Once they started planning to make a profit, once they started going through coaching and all the managers started to understand their numbers, we saw some real improvements. We're seeing a sort of a 7% improvement from year to year just by doing that little bit of planning. And they're not extreme numbers. They're not numbers like they weren't terrible before. 33 and 35 are not bad, but 28.8 and 31.9 are much better. And if you're talking in dollar terms with this sort of thing, if this is a $10 million group, we're talking 7% improvement. You're talking $700,000. That's a massive improvement in profit. And that makes a big difference to anyone's lives, anyone's view on a venue, anyone's basically happiness, being able to make that extra money just by improving 2 numbers and having a process around it. I've also got an individual venue. So this individual venue was more 18 months before, 18 months after. So they operated on their own without this process for 18 months. Then they started doing it. This particular venue, you can see a massive improvement in profit, but their biggest improvement was actually in their kitchen. So they had wages running at about 32% in the kitchen, which is just compared to their food sales. Once they improved that down to about 20% of their food sales. And you can see there was about a 5% improvement in wages. COGS came down dramatically as they started actually understanding and analysing it and looking at it all the time. So, and I remember talking to the chef when he started saying to the owner that the 30% was a good number, when in fact we found out that 20% was a much better number and actually was very, very achievable without a dramatic increase in sales. It was actually mostly from just smarter rostering and thinking about it more and planning it. Now, the next example I've got is a little bit more extreme. Now, this is a venue that was about ready to close. This sort of loss that they had, and I've put dollars on this one to emphasize it, and the change they were able to make. This is when I talked about that extreme example of a venue that was running at about 60% wages. And just by planning and just by changing a few things, they didn't come down straight away. They came down to about 40% wages, and they started improving their COGS and all their other, and started thinking about all the things they had in their venue and planning. And in 3 months, they were able to turn it into a dramatic profit. This doesn't always happen. I just wanted to give an extreme example because it's a little bit of showing off that why we achieve something so quickly, but it's not a typical example, but it is achievable. If your venue's struggling, really struggling, then it's very likely you can turn it around very quickly with this sort of focus. All right. And just going back to the group, not all the benefits you get from understanding your numbers come from direct finance numbers or directly to numbers or directly to dollars. There were so many other benefits we saw in these groups. There was an improvement focus started coming amongst the managers. They started to always think, how do I get better? When they were coming to the weekly meetings, they didn't like to disappoint. They wanted to be known they were doing well. So there became this bit of pressure to not have to justify a bad performance, but to talk about a good performance. I know the owner has a much more confidence in the managers now. He's much happier with how things are. His conversations with the managers have improved. He can now have confidence that they've got the best interest of the venue at heart. They're always looking to improve those numbers and make sure they get better. What the biggest key I found, and this is the one that surprised me the most, was the finance manager, who now I think she really loves what she does now. She's enjoying it a lot more. She often pulls me up if I get a bit too negative, and she talks about, and she's a lot more positive now. And also I've found, particularly the managers are talking to each other, they're able to compare their own performance, and there's a little bit of peer pressure crept into it, which even though peer pressure can be a bad thing, it can also be used in a positive direction and make things a little bit better. It's not all about numbers. Does that make sense? Yeah, numbers are great, and it seems like accountants live in a world of numbers, but I think you've got to look at the other things, because being in hospitality, we're also looking at how do we improve the customer experience? How do we make things better for the customer? That might lead to dollars, but it's not a direct relationship. So again, not all about numbers is what I like to think of, how I like to think of this. So I mentioned a little bit earlier that I'll be talking a little bit about a profitability planning session. So one thing about the sessions, one thing about who it's for, it's not for non-venue owners. You need to own a venue. the negative mindset really hurts. We might be able to turn it around, but it does actually make it harder to work with someone who is doom and gloom. You need to, hopefully in the conversations we have, you can change that. You can't be non-coachable. I mean, being coachable means that you have to, being coachable means you have to take on feedback. You have to understand that you need to take advice. You need to be able to listen, and you need to be able to take some feedback that isn't always nice. Who the profitability planning sessions are for venue owners. You have to be coachable. Won't always be nice. Hopefully someone that's resonated with this session. And of course, my favorite thing, a positive mindset. We're here as part of the show today. So we're over at stand T6. You can scan the QR code. You've all got one on the back of your brochures there as well if you want to set up a meeting with us, if you want to set up one of these sessions. Or you can come and talk to us at stand T6 and we can talk about this further and if we can see how this applies to your world. All right, any questions? Sorry, next slide says that. Questions? The slide's there now, you can ask questions. I didn't just say it. Questions? Since what? No, you know all about this. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.